So this is my Walstad shrimp jar, and it's the first one I've ever made. Other than one pretty huge mistake, I would class it as a success, but I wanted to make this video going over some of the things that I would change or at least do differently if I could start again. So starting with the main mistake that I made, and it was literally a couple of days ago that this happened, and it's relating to water top-ups. Being an established Walstad setup, this jar doesn't require partial water changes to maintain safe and stable water parameters for the shrimp inside, but it does need water top-ups to counter evaporation. I usually do these water top-ups on a Sunday, but I didn't factor in that the temperature has been increasing recently as we work our way through spring. This means that more water is evaporating than previously has throughout winter, and it needed more water added to the jar than usual. Unfortunately, Sunday gone, I stuck to my normal routine of taking water from one of my aquariums that has almost identical water parameters to this jar and topping it up. I would estimate that I usually top up 5 to 10% of the water in this jar per week. In this week it was probably at least double that due to the additional evaporation. Unfortunately, that evening I did see that 3 of the 4 cherry shrimp had died since I put that water in, and I haven't seen the 4th one for a couple of days now, so he may be dead somewhere as well. The Armano shrimp and Neurite snail in here are both fine. I've seen them active as usual without issue, but that's definitely a lesson learned for me. From now on, I'm going to be trying to do my water top-ups when the water level in the jar gets to around the shoulder level, and this should prevent me from having this mistake again. The second thing that I would change is to add a heater to the jar when I initially set it up rather than just leave it at room temperature. Now I know that plenty of people out there keep shrimp at room temperature without issue, and like I said, this jar is 4 months old now. Until my water changed there was no problems with the actual shrimp, but I do think water temperature had an effect on my plants. Being a Walstad jar setup that uses plants for natural filtration, the plants definitely need to be taken care of, and thankfully it wasn't really an issue in this setup because shrimp have such a low bio load, but if this was an aquarium with fish in it then it could have been a bigger deal. The main reason that I didn't add a heater to the jar is because I didn't know you could get heaters small enough, but I recently did find this tiny little USB heater on Amazon and I picked it up to give it a try. Now I was very skeptical because this is very cheap and it's just USB powered, so I did a trial run with it when I got it, and it managed to maintain a steady 75 degrees Fahrenheit or 24 degrees Celsius in the jar for a couple of days without issue. I do plan to rescape this jar soon, but the rescape will have this tiny little heater in the jar to help maintain a steady water temperature from the very start. I'm not sure if this will be able to stand the test of time because like I said it's very cheap and it is just a USB powered heater, but if it doesn't work I'll just upgrade to one of the small Hygge heaters and see if I can get that in the jar somewhere. Moving on to the next thing that I change, and it's the plant choices that I ran with for this tank. The jar contains Hygrophila polysperma, Rotala rotundifolia, Eliocharis auriculata, Java fern, Java moss and Salvinia. I also had a Cryptwentii green in here that ended up melting right back and failing, and I am guessing that the lower water temperature in the jar did contribute to that. Then we have the Eliocharis that has been grown, but it's been grown so slow it's barely noticeable, and I mean that there's probably a couple of extra new blades that have grown in the jar over 4 months. And then you compare that to the Eliocharis parvula that's in my 8-gallon Walstad Better Fish tank, maintained at around 26 degrees Celsius and being a harder version of Eliocharis to keep, and the growth rate difference is just night and day, so I am guessing that water temperature played a role in that. The Rotala rotundifolia was grown but at a very slow pace until probably 2 months ago when the ambient temperatures started to increase because we were out of winter, and it's probably grown faster than the Hygrophila polysperma right now, and as you can see it's overtaken its growth on the emergent side of the jar. Another potential issue with the jar relating to water temperature is that the Salvinia floating on the surface wasn't propagating anywhere near as quickly as it does in my heated aquariums. And that brings me on to my next point, because early in its lifespan this jar did have a bunch of problems with thick green algae forming on the surface of the water, and this lasted probably 3 months after the initial setup. Initially I thought this might just be due to it being a Walstad shrimp jar using topsoil capped with fine gravel, or maybe due to water temperature, but then I saw a few people on YouTube and TikTok saying that more floating plants should be able to get rid of the floating algae. After taking some of the spare Salvinia from one of my other aquariums and adding it to the jar, the green surface algae ended up going within 1 week. Now, like I mentioned, the growth rate of the rotala has sped up as well, so that'll be taking up more nitrogen compounds from the water, so that could have helped as well, but there's barely any surface algae in this jar anymore. So moving forward, I will probably cover the surface of unheated shrimp jars with floating plants to try and help prevent this issue in the future. This is because floating plants have easier access to CO2 from the atmosphere than plants that are submerged, so they tend to use up a lot more nitrogen compounds from the water column and help keep everything safe and stable. The next thing that I'd probably change if I could start over is the use of Hygrophila polysperma in the jar. Now this one is definitely going to come down to personal preference, but over the last month or two, the wild unpredictable growth of Hygrophila polysperma has started to annoy me a little bit in most of my tanks, and I have started to remove it. Initially, I really liked the look of Hygrophila polysperma in the jar, and its wild unpredictable growth reminded me of some of the jungle style aquascapes out there, and I thought it looked cool. The problem is that this shrimp jar runs on a low powered USB light, so that unpredictable growth of the Hygrophila polysperma can start to prevent light from getting to the plants below it. Moving forward, I will probably stick with plants like the different types of rotala out there, Limnophilia or Ludwigia, where the growth is vertical and a lot more predictable. This makes it easy to plan the light penetration for the jar and get the most out of the cheap little light that I run on it. The last thing that I would definitely change in this jar is the coconut with the Java fern attached to it. My initial thinking was to add it to the jar to add a shaded hiding spot for the shrimp, but in all honesty, it's very rare that I haven't seen them just on the stem plants or on the moss grazing. I did see some cherry shrimp go in and out of the jar, but it really wasn't common, and the thing that paid the most attention to it was the horned neurite snail in it, and for the first week of setup, it probably fed on all of the biofilm and algae on the coconut before going onto the tank glass and living there. As you would expect in a small little jar like this, a coconut shell takes up a large amount of the real estate that could be used for stem plants to help filter the water and provide grazing spots for the shrimp, so yeah, moving forward, I probably wouldn't add anything like this again. The next thing is more of a 50-50 point that I want to talk about, and it's the light on the jar. I considered upgrading this to a more powerful clip-on light countless times over the last 4 months, but I ended up sticking with it because I kept seeing consistent growth with some of the plants in there. In all honesty, considering this is literally a USB powered light, I'm very happy with what it's been able to do. It's so low powered that the lumen output isn't even listed on the Amazon sales page. A plug-based light with a higher lumen output could have helped some of the plants grow faster and help with natural water purification, but like I said, I didn't have any issues with any of the shrimp or the snail until month 4, and it was on user error with the water change that caused the problem. And like I mentioned earlier, I really do think that the water temperature in the jar was the main restricting factor for the plants. As you can see, the Hygrophila polysperma and Rotala rotundifolia are literally grown out of the top of the jar now, and it's still running on that cheap USB light. So yeah, with low light requirement plants, I really do think that it's fine. It's more the water temperature that I need to work on, but I might upgrade to a more powerful light just so I can see what's happening inside of the jar a little better, because from time to time the limited light does make it a pain to see the shrimp. Anyway guys, that brings the video to an end. Thanks for watching. Hopefully the points I've raised will be able to help you with your own shrimp jars, because I actually think these are quite an underrated little hobby to have, especially if you're in the aquarium hobby anyway. So thanks for watching and have a good day.